I love that turkey. I really hope people listening to this actually go to YouTube and watch the video, because the video is so fascinating, because it's beautiful in Florida and you get to see the great permaculture that you've built there. I think it's really cool.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this.
Hey, Jim, thanks for being here. I am so honored and excited to have you on my podcast. This is going to be an epic conversation. We have been talking back and forth via email, and every time I get an email, I get even more excited. So this day is finally here. I like to let my guests introduce themselves. In a minute, take it away. But in case you don't mention it, I want everybody who's listening to know that you are a four-time All-American and national championship wrestler, which speaks to grit and determination. That's its own podcast. You're an ecopreneur, in which I love that word. You're a father, a husband, and a visionary. And I love the turkey for those who are watching this on the video. And then I also want to make sure you talk about the community that you built in Costa Rica and what happened there. I heard that story on my friend Matt Drinkhon's Eternal Optimist podcast, and I thought that was an amazing story. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to share with you and your audience the solution to all sorts of problems. The solution, literally, when we achieve mass adoption of taking the poisons out of our landscapes and growing food instead of lawns. I know how simple that sounds. It sounds so simple. Why didn't anybody think of that? Well, a lot of people have. But when we do that as a culture, a global community, we literally end deforestation and mass extinction. We reverse cancer and diabetes and heart disease trends. We end world hunger and we end tyranny by taking the power back, by becoming self-reliant again. And what most people believe is that it's hard. But I'm here to share with you all that it's infinitely harder not to do this. It's so easy. This landscape around me is far less maintenance than a lawn and provides an exponential amount of food and abundance and joy. I grew up in Minnesota. My mom actually lived off grid. She was a farmer in southern Minnesota, Medelia, Minnesota, not far from Little House on the Prairie. And she grew up, with the Minnesota winters 100% off grid as a farmer. Now, I've since learned that Florida climate is better for me. But my point in saying this is this can be done. Growing all of the food that we need to thrive can be done in every zone, from Arizona to Minnesota to Poland and everywhere in the world. It's a little different strategy as to how we do it, right? In Minnesota, for instance, there's such a huge yield in July, August, September, and October that we need to learn how to can and dehydrate and store food. Where here in Florida, I can walk outside anytime I want and choose from over 200 different types of food growing. So my point is, I grew up in this idea that working with nature and being the steward of the land is just simply a logical, easy, wonderful way to live. So that's kind of what got me kicked off. I then wrote my goals for the first time at 19. And that's when I wrote that I wanted to be a four-time All-American and national champion. I wrote my goals again after traveling into 47 countries and living with the Maasai and living in many different places. I wrote my goals again when I was 29. And I was dead broke at the time, or pretty much. I had $600. And I was living in Africa and different places. And I wrote my goals that I wanted to be, I was broke, so I wanted to make money. So I wrote that I wanted to be a multimillionaire, and I wanted it all to happen in a fairly short amount of time, 3 years. And when I shared my goals with my friends, they laughed at me. And some of them even got angry with me. And they said, Jim, that's not how it works. You're delusional. Well, I had read enough books and I had studied the greats while I was traveling. One of my favorites is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
It's a great book.
Isn't it? And
Yeah,
every
it's a
time I,
great book. It's a
yeah,
great book.
and every time I read it, it's so dense with incredible information and insight that it's like reading it new every 5 years or so. So what Napoleon deducted after a lifetime study of these successful entrepreneurs is whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. That's a powerful deduction. It's a powerful concept. So instead of debating or arguing in my mind with somebody like Napoleon Hill, I simply took it as truth. I said, okay, if that's true, then what can I conceive and believe? Well, that allowed me to, in 3.5 years, with the help of a team, of course, a great team, we were able to go from zero to $1.3 billion in gross revenue. It was an incredible run. And then I got bored with that industry and I bought a boat and I lived on the ocean for a year.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, it was really,
I mean, I would imagine there would have been a lot of time for contemplation to do that as well, to
yes.
have that downtime and to literally, I mean, I would think you're unplugged there if you're out there on the ocean, but I think that in itself would be a fascinating story as well. But I mean, it's just as equally impressive to build a $1.3 billion company in 3 years. I mean, that's just some people hearing that trying to wrap their brain around that going like, "Oh, wait a minute, that can't be done." But you did it, and to the point that you read it in Napoleon Hill, what the mind can conceive and believe can be accomplished. And I know our conversation is going to carry that theme through as you tell more of your story.
Yeah, that's right, Sue. And the construction sounds that you hear around me, we are building a community into a food forest, right? Literally, the first thing we started with was building soil. And that's very simple. We just put mulch down and then we put beans and different plants to build soil. And so, anyway, so excuse the construction noise, but it's all for a good end.
That's okay. Well, you know what? Actually, it's a good pause because I really want you to define the word food forest.
Yeah.
Because honestly, when I when I saw that at first, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got food. I go to my refrigerator, supermarket, there's my food. And then when I think of forest, I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania. And to me, forest is like big trees,
Yeah.
So putting the refrigerator coupled with big trees doesn't make the best visual ever. So, how do you define food forest?
A food forest is a system that mimics a natural forest, except for it's designed to produce a massive amount of food and beauty and habitat. So instead of just using words, I'm going to show you around a little bit. So 21 months ago, there was literally nothing here but sand. This was Florida sugar sand, which a lot of people consider impossible to grow in. So we use the permaculture design principles, and permaculture is an agricultural design science that the ethics of permaculture are very simple: earth care, people care, and fair share. And the word share, I like to point out, is a voluntary act. So it's not done at the point of a gun, right? It's be sharing and service to our community is the most selfish thing I could ever do. Because by sharing our abundance with our community feels compelled to share their abundance back. And that's one of the key elements to changing our world is to realize that service to ourselves, our friends, our families, and our communities is literally the solution to this narrative of fear and scarcity, right? Which has us contract our ability to serve and our awareness of the value of service. right? So yeah, so we're standing in a 21-month-old food forest that has over 240 different types of food producing plants. Isn't that incredible?
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is because it looks like I mean, it just looks all green to me. But what are some of the things that grow there that are edible?
Well, we have about 10 different types of bananas. I'm not sure if you can see those in your screen right now. We have turmeric and ginger and avocados and peaches and plums and pears and raspberries and blueberries and blackberries and oranges and tangelos and tangerines and lemons and limes and moringa and cranberry hibiscus and basil and society garlic and mulberries.
And a
It's
turkey, and a turkey.
yeah, and look at these friendly turkeys.
That's great.
We have 7 different species of fish in our fish pond. We have ducks and 3 different types of chickens and 3 different types of cows. And
Wow.
we integrate the systems. So what we see in what we consider traditional agriculture is all wrong. The way that we are stewarding our land and the agricultural systems that are taught in our colleges and universities around the world for the last 3 generations are the most destructive teaching in the world today. It is based on monoculture agriculture, and it's based on using chemical and often toxic and poisonous inputs. Our system has 0 chemicals, 0 pesticides. Instead, we have diversity. Diversity becomes the foundation of strength within the system.
Wow. Okay. So could you give an example? Our current system that we have is dysfunctional.
Yes.
What would be an example that would drive the point home?
That's such an awesome question, Sue. Okay, so one of my favorite examples is in the United States, we have over 47 million acres of lawn, right? The lawn takes more chemicals, more pesticides, more human resources than any other crop, and it does not provide food. So, in place of a lawn, this crop right here is called perennial peanut, right? It's like the earth's living band aid. It's a system that when you put this perennial peanut, which by the way grows just the way you see it here, we have not ever had to mow this crop. It's about 2 inches off the ground and it actually heals the soil. It creates a mesh network of healing nodules that create not only ground cover, but they have beautiful edible yellow flowers, which are also good for the bees and the pollinators. And then it fixes nitrogen in the soil. So if all we did in our world were take the poisons out of our lawns and we put this ground cover in, and then we add some fruit trees and some living salad bars. Like I'll show you a living salad bar now. Like like this right here. This is called longevity spinach. It's no maintenance. And anytime we want to have an incredibly healthy salad, in fact, it's called longevity spinach because it helps us live a long time. So you can walk outside and you can choose from multiple different types of living salad bar plants that are perennials. Now, a perennial is a crop that you plant once and it keeps producing more and more and more over time, as opposed to an annual that you plant and then you harvest and then you have to replant.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That looks good.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, Jim, I'm really impressed. And this is hitting home for me a little bit. So years and years ago, I actually lived on an acre and I planted a garden for a couple years in a row. And one of the things I did do was I actually bought bags of garden soil, the big giant bags
Yeah.
at Home Depot, and I
Yep.
planted lettuce, like 3 different kinds. I think I planted spinach, romaine, butter crunch, something else in there, but they
Awesome.
grew.
Yep.
It was cool. I was like, I just put them on pallets. I put holes in the bottom, and it wasn't practical for me to rip up my lawn. Actually, I wouldn't even have thought of that at the time. That was one way that I grew something in, out there in my backyard. There is a sense of satisfaction with growing your own food.
Oh, it's
So I
incredible.
mean, it is. It is. It was really neat that I could go out there and just grab some lettuce when I wanted to, and I didn't have to drive to the grocery store to get it. Have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Brian Johnson?
Wow,
So
it does sound really familiar.
Okay. Well, he built an app called Heroic, and he wrote a book called Arate, Activate Your Heroic Potential. And he said something that caught my attention that I wanted to say to you, and I want to know what your thoughts were. He said, quote, "Our food system is dysfunctional." What does that mean to you?
Well, I'm going to get into it because it is dysfunctional from the perspective that it benefits humanity. No, it does not. It enslaves humanity. But our food system is incredibly functional by those people who are actually leading the way, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, 50 years ago, Henry Kissinger said, if you want to control people, control food. He was the head of the World Economic Forum. What he stated was not just the ramblings of some crazy guy who's talking about controlling people. And by the way, he also said if you want to control countries, control oil. And if you want to control the world's currency. This man speaking about controlling people and countries and the world was the leader of the entity that was strategizing to do exactly that. And in permaculture, we like to turn the problem into the solution. The problem, the fundamental system of humanity's enslavement is control of two things: the narrative, the mind, which is fear and scarcity. Our system here demonstrates that fear and scarcity are an illusion. They're not logical or real in a system that stewards the earth. And the second piece is the food system. So, from the metaphysical, fear is the control mechanism, and from the physical, food is the control mechanism because it's our toxic food that leads to our dis-ease of the gut, of the mind, and of our land, right? So the narrative of overpopulation, for instance, when we simply use our land wisely, we could feed 20 billion people just off of the U.S. agriculture by land. It's just not done that way because that's the function of the current system, is to control people. I also like to show you this real quick. Can you see that on your screen right there?
It looks like a little red ladybug.
It's a ladybug. Now, people ask us all the time, what about insects? What? All the what abouts are solved in the permaculture ethics and design principles. So we actually let ladybugs go. We let praying mantises go here. We have no bug problem. We have no infestation problems at all. Instead, we invite the diversity of all life. And then what happens is nature balances itself out. In fact, Bill Mollison said, and this is one of my favorite concepts: you don't have a snail problem, you have a duck deficiency.
I love it. For
Yeah.
those who don't know, it's the ducks who eat the snails, correct?
Yes.
So you need to balance everything out. It's like, you've got the eagles that eat the small, rodents. That's the food chain, isn't it?
Yep.
So I'm going to play, I don't want to, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Yes.
Somebody listening to this saying to themselves, okay, Jim, this is all great. Yep. You're growing this stuff. That's great. But I still have to eat. A balanced diet. What does that mean to you? What does that practically look like? I'm looking out over my computer and I have a lawn out there and there's only grass there. And I'm looking at that going, like, I can do something with that. What am I going to do? And can you plant enough so that I don't have to go to the grocery store?
I'll start with the kind of the inference that you might not have enough space to grow all your food. And that's totally true. If you have 5 square foot in the corner of a closet, you can grab an LED light from Home Depot and you can get 5-gallon buckets, and you could put sweet potatoes in 5-gallon buckets. And within a year, you could have 100 pounds of sweet potatoes growing in a closet. So my point with that is garden what you've got, use the space that you have wisely. Now I'll go next level here. This circle, you see this white rock shell circle here? So it's about 20 feet in diameter. On that little circle, right, that 20-foot diameter circle, you could have 3 primary food producing trees. You could have different types of nuts and different types of apples and peaches, plums, avocados, whatever suits your agricultural zone. And that's very important, right? Avocados don't grow in Minnesota. Apples don't grow well here in Florida. Right? So you pick the thousands of different types and different species of food producing plants that grow well in your zone. So back to this area, we could have 3 primary fruit trees. We could have 3 understory fruit trees. We could have 5 or 6 shrubs, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, and all that. And then we could have mushrooms. We could have turmeric and ginger and perennial lettuces and basil and garlic and all sorts of rosemary and thyme just on this little area. So whatever you have, the point is to design the area to be as functional as it can possibly be.
So, a small step for somebody, I know you created a company called Food Forest Abundance. Can somebody go there and then start finding information and somebody to talk to? Because I mean, if they're getting excited about what they're hearing and they're saying, "Yep, Jim, I'm with you," but I don't know where to start.
Yes, that's exactly what we do. Everything starts with the intention, the desire to be free and healthy and to serve ourselves, our community, and our world. And then from that point, we go into the design process. So if anybody would like to go to foodforestabundance.com, and it can start with a free 30-minute strategy session where one of our professional permaculture designers will chat with you about what your goals and your vision are, about your space and your intentions. And then from there, you can either DIY it, right? You can go on YouTube and you can start the whole process of designing your own space, which takes some time because there's a lot of integral pollination. There's a lot of components to the permaculture process. If you want to speed up time, then one of our designers would love to design your space, which is a very detailed process showing exactly what guilds to put in different places in your yard, right? And a guild is a community of plants that support each other. Right. So again, one of our primary things with permaculture is a very low maintenance system. Right. We could walk away for 30 years from this system. We could just walk away. And barring a climactic event or poisons coming in and destroying the system, this system will not only be an epic jungle of food, but this system will span for hundreds of miles because the wind and the rain and the birds and the animals will come into the system. They'll eat the food and then they'll go over here and plant another seed.
Yeah, people don't realize that happens with the little rodents and the birds that come in and, hey, they got to go too and they fly off, and that's how that plant wound up in somebody else's yard because they didn't plant it there, but it got there by some bird or rodent. I think that's awesome. And you
Amazing.
know what? Talk about the community that you built in Costa Rica, because that was very functioning and very successful.
Yeah, it was such I learned what I needed to learn to have the awareness that I have now. And so what happened, it was 2007, and I had my first 2 daughters. I now have 4 beautiful daughters. And that changed my life more than anything, because now I started looking at the world from a different lens. I started asking the question, what's the world of my kids and grandkids going to be like? And at the same time, I learned permaculture, and I learned that the world is being destroyed, that we are mining our resources and destroying our atmosphere, our soil, and our water systems in a way that's radically unsustainable. And so I went into a period of scarcity. I got scared, not for me so much, but for the sake of my daughters and grandkids and great grandkids. I went into this period of, oh no, what are we going to do? And it took me a couple of years to figure out that everything I had learned from Napoleon Hill and David Hawkins and all these great teachers throughout my life, that it was my job, my duty to put all of those things together to the best of my ability to share this solution with the world. Right. So the first thing I did is we created communities in Nicaragua and then Costa Rica to demonstrate the integration of permaculture techniques and processes and design into a community. Right. So the first thing we did was we bought out a fruit tree nursery, and we bought all the plants and we planted them all over the community. And people started getting very excited, and they started coming in and they started saying, I want to be part of this, right? It was such a beautiful time. It was 2010 when we started. 2011 and 12, especially the beginning of 2012, there's about a 2-year period in there between 2010 and 2012. We became the most successful community in the country. We had 73 homes going. We had food growing everywhere. We had energy and people and life. We had community events and parties like multiple times a week. And then 2012 comes, and two things happened. Number one is the government of Costa Rica came in to extort us because we were so successful, and the real estate market in general there had collapsed. We changed the narrative, which allowed us to be very successful. Well, they came in and said, pay us 20 grand under the table, or we're going to shut you down, citing environmental infractions. Well, we did not pay the extortion payment, and they shut us down. And they wrote about us in the local paper, along with 15 other communities that they had extorted. Some of them deserved to be shut down. Most of them probably did not. Well, fortunate for us, we had enough publicity. We were written up in the New York Times and stuff, where some people came in to support us, including the guy who wrote the original document as to where we could develop. He became our primary witness. And what we exposed through the court proceedings was that the attorneys for the entity that was supposed to protect the environment, right? There are two entities, Satena and Menai or Menayet. Well, the Menayet guy was our primary witness, and we beat the chief people at the other entity who were extortionists. So the good news is we won in court. The bad news is, according to a court-appointed actuary, we are owed $28 million, and that's been about 9 years in the making. We have to pay $250,000 to some legal team to even try to get the money, which is good money after bad in Costa Rica with the legal system there. So we learned what we needed to learn. Maybe someday we'll get paid. The other thing that happened while this thing was going on is that the election cycle started. Now, I have, in fact, just a quick side note, I was asked to run for mayor here in Orlando about 6 months ago by two very prominent politicians here who are also awake to what's going on. And after a 48-hour campaign, which was exploding in energy, they said, you cannot run for mayor. Why? Because I've never voted. I don't believe in the system. The system is corrupt through and through, so I've never participated. But anyway, it's
That's all right.
amazing.
There are bigger things for you, Jim. I feel like your talent and your attention needs to be in other places other than politics in that capacity.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yes.
and you've had the audience of some prominent politicians as well. So you've been planting this seed, no pun intended, in the
Yeah.
ears of people that it needs to be in, and that it might not have been you might not have been as effective if you were mayor. I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sue. It's perfect. You might be right on that. A lot of people suggested the same, and I felt the conflict. I was excited for the platform because that's what this is about. It's about catalyzing a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption, a cultural shift that leads to mass adoption of the most logical and wise and convenient thing that we could ever do for ourselves. And that's take the poisons out and grow food instead of lawns. So, what happened, and this is so relevant in today's world, it was 2012, and the community started talking politics. Some of them were staunch CNN watchers, some of them were staunch Fox News watchers, and then all of a sudden there was an eruption of fighting within our community. And it was painful to witness. I was trying to be the mediator in these different fights. And they got so passionate that best friends who had never talked politics, right, are now separated. We had one restaurant, one pool, one community center, and multiple people said, I can never go to the community center because I don't want to see that guy or that gal. It was mind-boggling. So to say we're doing the same now, and this is not by accident, my friends, it's by design. The narrative of divide and conquer is what we are witnessing now. So that's why my mission, our mission at Food Forest Abundance and Galt's Landing is to elevate the conversation above politics back to the fundamental self-reliance narrative that made the United States and the Constitution and any self reliant community great. It's back to not counting on governmente, which actually happens to mean mind control, literally, and back going into empowermente, empowering our minds to be free and healthy and self reliant again.
Yeah, Jim, if I hear what you're saying, we really need to go back to what it was almost 100 years ago, or I don't know actually how many years ago, but when communities and people could gather, and even though they had, there's a turkey, even though they had different opinions,
Yeah,
they could still be in the same space. And
yeah,
what has happened today is we have I hesitate to use the word brainwash, but we have convinced ourselves that if you have a different political position than I do, you're my enemy.
yeah,
And really, that's not what it should be. It should be, okay, if you have that different political position, that's okay. That's your opinion. I have mine. That's okay. It's
yeah,
my opinion. We can coexist in the same world. And just like you would have the visual of people coming together, like I have my hands together here and working together, even though we're all different, we come together and work together for the common good versus being uh different entities and saying you're my enemy, and now we can't work together on things for the common good.
that's exactly right. Then that's why elevating is so valuable. Like I just spoke with Bobby Kennedy. We had a one-on-one sit down, and I shared with him a campaign strategy. I said, Bobby, the campaign strategy that I've laid out for you will not only win the election, but the campaign itself will change the world over the next 12 months. And he looked at me and goes, wow, that's a big claim. I said, let's take a look. And as I laid out putting food forests in schools and churches and prisons and community centers and army bases around the world, he saw it. I witnessed Bobby Kennedy become inspired, and he said, I'm in. I then met with Dr. Shiva, the guy who created the internet, 4 degrees from MIT, who's also running for president. And I shared with Dr. Shiva the campaign strategy that I'm laying out for you. And I shared the same campaign strategy. And it was amazing to see these people who are very opposed to each other in a lot of ways on this topic They agreed wholeheartedly and they came together. So let's inspire and let's call out. Let's invite, is maybe a better concept. Let's invite
Hmm.
these politicians who are running for office. Let's invite the influencers who have so much influence over the minds and the actions of humanity to come in, like you're doing today, Sue. I'm so thankful for this. And let's shine a light on the solution to all of the world's biggest problems. Right? Victor Hugo said there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. The idea is nature. Some people call it God, or some people on the other side of the world might call it under a different name, but it's the same solution. And let's get back to nature. Let's steward our earth. Let's serve each other again, and we change the world.
Oh, that's great, Jim. Like, isn't it just at the end of the day, isn't it just about awareness and education?
Yes.
Bring an awareness to the problem and education to the solution. So awareness is the first the first step. I love that turkey. I really hope people listening to this actually go to YouTube and watch the video because the video is so fascinating because it's beautiful in Florida and you get to see the great permaculture that you've built there. I think it's really cool. Jim, what's something that you thought would be difficult about building what you have here, but actually wound up being easy? And then flip it. What did you think would be easy and then wound up being difficult for you?
The most difficult part, the part that really stuns me to presence now and again, is talking to very wise people. And what has blown my mind at times is how these smart people, they have such deep belief systems, bad science and bullshit, all the BSs around how simple, right? In fact, Bill Moleson's quote, "Well, the problems of our world are increasingly complex. The solutions remain embarrassingly simple." What has been shocking to me is that people really have a tough time seeing the simplicity of this for everything, right? So that was the hard part. The easy part was once it's designed properly and once this food forest is installed, the ease and joy of maintenance is shocking. I mean, again, I want to drive this point home. Shush up, turkeys. Um, this is way less maintenance than a standard landscape. Now, if we wanted it to be really fancy, if we wanted to create square bushes or round bushes, we could do that, right? It's not my style, but if you want it to look like that, you can. The difference is very simple. Instead of these being only ornamental plants, they have a much higher function, and that is they also produce food.
Mm. Wow, like I'm just thinking on a grand scale. We were talking about real estate, or you mentioned about real estate before, and like lawns. And it's amazing when you think about it, all the space that we have out there. That all, if all we did was we just planted gardens and worked the land as well. What I really love about what you're saying, and this is kind of practical to me a little bit. So I mentioned before, I had a garden years ago, but the one problem I had with my garden was the weeds. You know, I had to go out there and, take care of my garden and tend the garden and everything. What I love about what you're saying, what you've done, and the education you can give to people is that our traditional thought about what a garden is really isn't what you're talking about. You're talking about we're going to plant something that's going to feed us, but you don't have to tend it and take the time out with it like you would for a traditional garden. I think that's awesome.
You
I really
nailed it.
do.
And I'll give you one visual representation of this. So you see these papaya here? So you can count the seeds in one of those papaya, but you cannot count the papayas in one of those seeds. It's infinite, it's exponential. So yeah, so a fruit tree, a berry bush, you could literally leave them be and never maintain them at all, and they're still, with decent soil, gonna produce you a lot of food.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right, let's bring it to some small steps, big wins.
Yeah.
And what are a couple of things? What are some small steps anything that comes to mind, small steps we could do that are going to change this, because it just takes one person to do one thing to impact many. So
Yes.
you've got the floor, and there's lots of small steps. So go for it, Jim.
The number one by far is relax your mind and enjoy life. Turn off tune out of everything that you recognize lowers your energy, decreases your vibration, brings you sadness or scarcity or shame or worry or fear. Turn off all the mainstream media narrative. Turn that off and tune in to your higher self. Tune into the things that make you feel good, that increase your vibration. Tune out of the things that lower your energy and tune in to the things that rise your energy. Number one. And then start planting seeds. Seeds can be ideas. Seeds are plants in the ground. And then ask yourself what's great about the situations that you're in that you currently don't think are great. And then ask how to serve. And when you get in the habit of doing these simple things and your energy becomes outward focused to service instead of protection, the world opens up.
Oh, Jim, that's beautiful. Because when we think of practical application, we think of things that we have to go do right away. But in reality, doesn't it just start with our own mindset? It starts with how we view ourselves. And when we love ourselves deep down, then it starts radiating outwards. Is there anything that you do, like a daily practice, meditation, something that's practical that grounds you besides farming and planting?
Yes. You see this little chair here? This is my meditation chair. It has copper and organite, and I sit there. I take off my shoes and I ground, and I sit in that chair or wherever I am. I actually meditate constantly. I've meditated, dozens of times during our conversation just by taking a breath and just allowing the mind to be clear. But meditation or silencing the mind and just allowing yourself to be at peace, at rest, mentally and physically, that's the most important thing for me.
Is there one book in particular, or a resource
Yeah.
that if somebody resonates with what you're saying, they could go to and get started?
I'll name three real quick. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and Swami Rama, Living with the Himalayan Masters, and David Hawkins' Power versus Force. Those three come to mind, all incredible.
Okay. All right. I'm kind of a Michael Singer fan. I read The Surrender Experiment.
Yeah.
That was probably the single book that changed my perspective that I read last year, and then went into The Untethered Soul and Living
Yeah.
Untethered.
I
And
love it.
all three of them altered my perception of
Yeah.
how I view events and how I view what's going on inside my mind. So
It's beautiful.
when you,
Those
when
are
you
fantastic. Yeah.
if you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be? What would you say?
I would tell myself to meditate more. And that there's nothing more important in my life now than just having a peaceful and clear mind.
What's one of the benefits for you with a peaceful and clear mind? Because we can hear it, but then we're like, oh, yeah, peaceful, clear mind. But what does that do for you?
It takes away from me the illusion that I can control anything. I don't I don't ever want to or try to or desire to control the flow of life. Instead, I take a breath and I ask for guidance. In fact, I feel emotions coming on right now. Like I almost start tearing up there. Um, I ask for guidance, I set an intention, and then I just listen and I experience and I feel. And then some magical stuff happens, and I'm talking mind blowing magic is happening every day. Do I have time for a real quick story?
You have all the time in the world. You can do whatever
Okay,
you want.
I'll share one. I was sitting in this meditation here that chair that I just showed you, and I was visualizing. I was sitting, right there, and I was visualizing this food forest growing. And I could see the whole thing turning into this food jungle. And I'm an animal lover. So I had an animal rescue center in Costa Rica with monkeys and parrots and toucans and all that. So I started imagining bringing in endangered animals, mating pairs of endangered species into our sanctuary. No cages are needed, right? In logical terms, right? I'm not going to bring in a pair of tigers, but bringing in maybe some lemurs into our food forest network and our Freedom Farm Academy network, and some spider monkeys and some monotitis, which I just happen to love all those, and creating these sanctuaries. And then I started imagining, because by the way, if anybody wants to create your own homestead like this, that's what we do. We design and install and support the transition of land from whatever it is to this, right? To this epic place of beauty and abundance. And we create multiple layers of value, which turn into profits as well. So anyway, I was visualizing the expansion of this, and then the idea of Noah's Ark came to mind, right? This is like Noah's Ark in the real. All over the world, we have these sanctuary places where animals can thrive. And as soon as I had that thought, my phone rang and it blew my mind. Noah was calling me. A guy that I'd only spoken to once for 5 or 10 minutes, who changed his name from Adam to Noah 6 years ago with the same idea in mind. And
Oh,
I
wow.
answered. I actually put him voicemail accidentally because I didn't see the name, and I called him back. I said, and I was shaking. I said, "Why did you call me right now?" And he said, "Because I was pinged to call you." So my point is, my friends, there's something absolutely divine happening in the world. We are in the great awakening. The apocalypse means lifting the veil, the ascension. We are experiencing the rising of human consciousness. And for those who are stuck in the old BS and the old paradigm, well, they're suffering. So we can help them rise out of their suffering by demonstrating our own truth and love and service and abundance.
Oh, I love it. I got chills when you were telling that story about having the phone call at the same time, because if we really are in tune to what's going on around us, to the universe, it doesn't matter whether you believe in a God, a higher power. There is something up there. I believe in God, all right, but that's just me. There is something up there orchestrating all of this. And I love your perspective of just allowing things to happen at the way they play out. We can control the things we can control, but we really can't control everything that goes on. We can control how we react, we can control our emotions, we can make choices to interact with others that think differently than we do.
Yeah.
But there are many things that are beyond our control. And while
Yeah.
you were talking, the one thing I want to make sure I get out there, and I actually plan on taking my daughter there. On your website, if you go to your website, anybody can go and visit a permaculture community in action. And I think that's just so cool.
Yes.
So I'm very, very excited about that. And you know what, Jim?
I can't wait.
I know, I want you to touch on, and you talked about it a couple of times, vision setting and goal setting, because I think that's something that people, there's a couple of roadblocks to that. One is that, oh, I can't set a goal. I don't, I'm just going to keep going the way I'm going. That's the first. The other is, what kind of goal am I going to set? And the third is, why should I set a goal? I don't even know if I'm going to get there. In your experience with goal setting, and you said you did it like when you were 19, what does goal setting look like and vision setting look like for Jim Gale?
Yeah, I've set goals, really put intention into goal setting 3 times in my life. and
Well, I'm
and
glad you said that, because I know people who do them like every 6 months.
yeah,
And so I think, I'm glad to hear that, because there's no one size fits all.
right, right. And maybe that works for them. Here's how I do goal setting. I start with the end in mind. right? So when I did the wrestling goal setting, I started with the 5-year vision that I was going to be this, all-American national champion. At the time, by the way, I sucked relative to the rest of the room. So when I handed my goals into my coach, he laughed at me and said, these goals are pretty lofty. Then same thing with the money thing. I set it out. So what I have done, and I would, you can all play with this, is create a vision for yourself that is compelling, inspiring, and that's potent, right? That makes you, when you imagine yourself living in the vision that you're creating, that you're motivated to action. And that's the thing, is I created this vision of peace on earth. This vision, starting with our community, Galt's Landing, be a demonstration site for all the things we're talking about. And this is the key. This is not a hypothetical solution to all of the world's biggest problems. It's a demonstratable solution. So I set
because
the
you're
vision out.
doing it.
Yeah, it's like, here it is.
Yeah.
So create the vision that inspires you and then reverse engineer it.
That's been a common theme I've heard from people as I take on interviews over the course of the year, and the most successful people that I have had the privilege of interviewing, they've all pretty much said the same thing. Take your big, hairy, audacious goal, that BHAG, and then reverse engineer it and then take each small step each day. And I love that you talked about the vision and thinking about it. And I would imagine that you couple that with meditation. So when you go into that meditative state and then you start envisioning that, it actually becomes a physical manifestation inside the body, and then it inspires you to continue to action. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Jim, as we wrap up, is there anything that you wish I would have touched on or asked you about that I didn't get a chance to, that you want to finish up with?
I would like to invite everybody listening to come visit us at Galt's Landing. We have Airbnbs. We're just getting another 2 houses done. We're on a private 430-acre lake. We've got the only dock on this lake. We've got a mile-long paved runway right next to us, which world leaders are going to be flying in here to learn about freedom. We're going to be doing summits with all these people. But my point is come visit. Right? We have, I think, 25 5-star reviews. We have no other reviews other than 5-star reviews. We have 100% inspiration rate. Nobody has ever left here and said this sucks. So I want to invite you to go to galtslanding.farm. It's GALTS landing.farm and book your stay here with us so I can meet you personally and inspire, to my best of my ability, you to be free as well.
Oh, wow. I'm excited. I can't wait to come visit. I will find a way or make a way. That's for sure.
Love it.
Jim, you have been extremely inspiring today. Thank you for the gift of your time. I know I'm walking away inspired with some small steps. I'm going to go check out the website. I'm looking at that lawn in my backyard that's useless at the moment, going like, how can I turn that into something that is more useful than what's there?
We will help. That's what we do. Our designers are standing by to help you do exactly that.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful for that too, because I would imagine people listening are going like, yeah, that's all well and good, Jim, but I don't know how to make that practical. And because we're all about small steps to big wins, you have developed and developed a company that helps us take those small steps to those big wins. So Jim, thank you again. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Sue. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.